Welcome to What Is. This episode is called Supply Chain. I bet you're all wondering, you're thinking, where has all the toilet paper gone? And I know this coronavirus is a respiratory disease or flu-like symptoms with respiratory symptoms. Why in the world is the toilet paper disappearing? And you're thinking, okay, my neighbor is buying 10,000 tons of toilet paper, and since toilet paper is cheap, all these people can keep affording to buy it over and over and over again. Well, that's not necessarily what the problem is. And being mad at your neighbor is not going to solve the problem. Here's a little bit of information that you can use to solve the problem. Where has all the toilet paper gone? Well, let's talk about supply chain. What is a supply chain? A supply chain is a network between a company and its suppliers to produce and distribute a specific product to the final buyer, in this case, toilet paper. We use this as a case-in-point example. This network includes different activities, people, entities, information, and resources. The supply chain also represents the steps it takes to get the product or service from its original state to the customer. That's you, to your bottom. Companies develop supply chains so they can reduce their costs and remain competitive in the business landscape. So basically, that's company speak for I'm getting my stuff from overseas. But let's continue. Okay, so I have a normal Walmart here somewhere in the eastern United States, and it is delivering toilet paper. Or actually, it can't because it doesn't have enough toilet paper on the truck. They can't fill the truck because they don't have enough toilet paper. Well, why don't they? Well, let's take the truck backwards and see where it came from. Wow, look at that. It comes from like Oregon, Washington, or Idaho near the Columbia River. Probably actually Walmart from a distributing building, but Cottonelle and Charmin and companies from Kimberly-Clark companies will distribute to Walmart. Anyway, and they're in the Pacific Northwest. So, how come they can't make enough toilet paper? Aren't they making enough? Don't they have enough factories? The answer to that question is, well, yes, they do. You get your toilet paper from a toilet paper factory, probably a Kimberly-Clark or some other company. Kimberly-Clark is based out of Irving, Texas, but they have factories on the Pacific Northwest near the Columbia River. Now, how do they make the toilet paper? Well, they take wood pulp. Now, the picture on the bottom right, the recycled pulp wood, that is not used toilet paper. It could have been at one time, but I doubt it. Now, it's paper that was basically not needed anymore, so they squished it up and they made it into recycled pulpwood. And then on the other side, the left side, you have cottonwood trees, which are farmed mostly nowadays in Canada to make pulpwood. Now, I know there used to be a factory in Cairo, Kentucky, or Cairo, Illinois. I don't remember. It's really close to the border. It really stunk really bad. There's also one in North Charleston, South Carolina, that actually made pulp. And you could smell it coming in from the ocean. When I came in from being on the Atlantic Ocean, I'd come into Charleston. I could smell North Charleston paper mill, and we knew that we were home. Anyway, so what the problem is with the supply chain is you need pulp to make your toilet paper. Kimberly-Clark and other companies don't have enough of it to make toilet paper for you. So it's not really hoarding. And it does have something to do with the coronavirus, but let me explain. Okay, so anyway, before I get into this article, why don't they have pulp from the United States? I mean, we've got lots of cottonwood trees, we got lots of tree farms. We used to have lots of paper mills, and we used to have lots of recycled products. We could actually make paper from recycled paper. We can make the pulp from recycled paper. But here's an article about Kimberly Clark closing a Everett mill. I think this is in Washington, but let me try to play this for you here. So this was back from 2011, December 8th. Now you remember the whole moving toward globalization. This is one of the victims of globalization. Kimberly Clark plans to close Everett Mill and Pulp. Basically, they closed this pulp mill, and this is one that used to help supply paper pulp for Kleenex and Huggies. This was an 80-year-old mill, but you know, paper mills last a long time. So anyway, they shut it down. 700 employees that they just totally laid off because they didn't need the paper mill anymore. And why didn't they need the paper mill? What's wrong with the paper mill that was being supplied to them that kept their local supply chain going? Well, they thought they could get it cheaper somewhere else. But really, did they? Let's move on. Okay, so raw materials. Now, where does Kimberly Clark and other companies like Kimberly Clark get the raw materials for their toilet paper? Well, 23% comes from virgin wood from Canada. And now there was an article by Vox saying that they're the ones that got this from, said 23% comes from virgin wood from Canada. And they were saying that Trump pissed off Pierre Trudeau and that's why we're not getting paper. But that's a bunch of bunk because that's only 23%. I looked on Alibaba and I said, well, where do factories get their pulp paper from? So Alibaba sells everything around the world, and I wanted to find out where the cheapest pulp was from. So here's the pulp. And 1%, well, actually 1% comes from Canada. Another 1% comes from India. And 96% of the pulp you can buy comes from China. Go figure. Huh. So they closed down their paper mills and they used recycled pulp wood from China. Go figure. And so when China had the coronavirus and we tried to stop the infection from coming over here because it was really bad in China, we had to stop the supply chain to stop the people from transporting. They were transporting the bulk goods, but they're also transporting themselves. And a lot of business is done between China and the United States. Not to say that's bad. I mean, it's, if you trade with another country, that's fine. But the problem is, if you have a problem, like say a war between China or a war between somebody that you trade with, guess what? You're not getting that stuff. So that's the one problem with the new globalist supply chain. And this coronavirus hopefully will help you guys understand why supply chains are important and why when someone says buy American, it's not just a company that's, is located in America and manufactures in America. Where do they get their raw materials from? If they can get it from a local area, that's better than getting it from a place like China. Okay, so I did some tracing. I said, well, where are their factories located? Their factories are located on the West Coast. And so where do they get their pulp? Well, they got to be nigh by a river so that they can make the pulp, but the pulp's already made if it's a recycled pulp. So they save themselves some money by getting it already squished, I guess is the word for it. So I traced it back and found out that most of the recycled pulpwood comes from China. And the reason why we don't have toilet paper right now isn't because your neighbor is hoarding it. I mean, that was the first problem. But the problem after that was that no matter how hard Kimberly Clark and the other companies like them try, they can't keep up with demand because they can't get the raw materials that they need. If they got the raw materials from the United States, they would be able to make as much as they need. And by the way, the United States has more recycled paper that people give back than any a country, at least as far as I can remember. But that could be wrong. I don't know. But we have a lot of recycled paper. But guess where we give our recycled paper to? Well, pretend those ships are in the United States and they're going very far east. Yes, that's right. We give our recycled paper to China so they can turn it into pulp and send it back to us. So when there's a problem with the global supply chain, like say we have a war or we have an epidemic or pandemic emergency, we're not getting toilet paper, guys. So next time, think about how the globalists consider the way things work and consider that the way things should work. You have the ability to do something about it. Granted, our ability is small, but we can keep this in mind for the next time. And companies that shut down perfectly good mills and send our recycle over to China. Actually, Kimberly-Clark doesn't send recycle. Other companies send recycle over. China sends it back and Kimberly-Clark buys it from them. I don't think it's a really good deal, but that's the way it is, and that's why you don't have toilet paper. So, supply chain affects you. Stop allowing companies to close down mills and get their raw materials from China. Find out where your Buy American company gets its raw materials. Thanks. That's all I got to say.